Hey, I'm BOZE. I cover a lot of cases on female killers because I've looked at a lot over the years, and I just find that female killers have lengthier motives that tend to stem back to their childhood. And that's what I'm interested in exploring. So if that is also something you're interested in exploring, grab your giant cozy t-shirt or grab your BOZE blanket, whatever it may be, and let me tell you about today's case. Patricia Columbo, aka Patty Columbo, was born on June 21st, 1956. She was the firstborn to her two parents, Frank Columbo and Mary Columbo. They were a hardworking Italian-American family. Patty's parents were there, Patty's grandparents were there, and they really all stayed close. So when Patty was born, she was the center of attention for Frank, for Mary, for both of her grandparents. Like, they were just so excited just to see what Patty was gonna blossom into. Also, she was a very pretty girl and she loved attention. You know, at every family function, Patty's grandparents were giving her a lot of attention. Her mom worked from home, so she was always hanging out with her, dressing her up in cute little outfits, putting little ribbons in her hair. Patty was that girl. But also, she was kind of a daddy's girl because Frank was a huge baseball fan. He would take Patty with him to Wrigley Field to go watch the Chicago Cubs all the time. People said that Frank had a temper, like when his team was losing, he got loud, but he was always very sweet, always very gentle and kind with his daughter, Patty. For the first 5 years of Patty's life, her love and attention were completely uncontested. But later, you know, when everything happened and we had more conversations with the parents, Patty's mom said that Patty was getting a little full of herself. Not only was this annoying to her mom, but she also wanted another kid. So when Patty's brother Michael was born, he is also getting swarmed with attention. And this takes away from the attention that Patty's getting. And I mean, I get it, because if Patty's mom was already feeling like, okay, you're being too much right now, you're demanding too much, because they gave her just unlimited love, attention, affection 24/7. That was her love language. It starts to develop in Patty's world that attention equals love. This is how people show me love, by giving me attention. Well, when Michael is born, now the attention it's not even split 50-50. Patty goes from getting 100% of the attention from the whole family to like 30%. And now she's about 6 or 7 years old and she's, going off to school. It's, bye, Patty. Oh, Michael, you're so cute. And this makes her incredibly resentful of her brother. I mean, you've heard of sibling rivalry before, but this girl was pissed. She felt like she was loved less because she was getting less attention. And that wasn't true. Her parents loved her just the same, but there's a new baby in town, the new baby, the humble baby. And they want to really appreciate those moments of his early years right now. And that's all it is. I get it. Patty's a kid. She doesn't understand. But the anger that developed in her really came out later. There's a book about the case called Love's Blood. And in this book, they actually describe when Michael was first born that Patty was happy. But she said she remembers as she held the baby, her family, who was all around, they were saying things like, "Oh, Mary, she'll be such a help to you. She loves him already." Somebody even said, "You'll have a built-in babysitter for years." Now, this is just what Patty described later, but when I tell you some more stuff through the court documents, I feel like there are moments where Patty just finally lets things out that affected her. So this could very much be true. These seemed like verbatim lines that were almost burned into her brain the day that she was holding Michael. As Patty gets older, her family moves to this town called Elk Grove in Illinois. And Elk Grove was hot. It was popping. The city was formally incorporated in 1956, and it was a planned suburban city. So they had plans for shops, the roads were going to be functioning, it was going to be lit. That was the plan for Elk Grove. So much so that the population increased from the early 1960s from 6,000 to over 20,000 by the 1970s. Everybody wanted to live there. And because Patty's parents, Frank and Mary, had worked so hard, they were in the upper middle class, and they were able to move right into Elk Grove. Patty was smart, she was pretty, she went to good schools, and she was considered a really good student. But Patty didn't have any friends. So Patty grew up always hanging out with her family, always hanging out with older people, not hanging out with other kids in the neighborhood. And then when she gets into school, she's so good at reading, she's like accelerated past everyone else. She finishes her homework before everyone else, or her classwork, whatever. And the teacher notices this and offers to make Patty the student aide. She literally the teacher's pet. But once again, she's like taken outside of the same group of her peers, people her age, and put on this level again with adults. Like now she's like the teacher's bestie. And still, year over year, Patty didn't have any friends. The only person that she would hang out with was her Aunt Janet, where her mom would like send her off once a month to go hang out with Aunt Janet. Once again, an older adult, because she said Patty needed something to do. As the years went by, Patty still didn't have any friends, but she needed more and more attention. This is like her lifeblood. This is her fuel. So when she's about 15 or 16, Patty realizes she can get a little more attention by being pretty and flirty. I mean, she probably doesn't always want more than that. She just wants a little bit of attention. So around this age, she starts working at a coffee shop that happened to be next to a Walgreens. And that Walgreens employed a guy named Frank DeLuca. That's how we met. I don't know, maybe he was like going in the mornings to go get his coffee or what. Maybe she was going over to the Walgreens, pick up a prescription or something. I don't know. But Frank DeLuca was the pharmacy manager at a Walgreens. Now, Frank was not only 34 years old, but he was also married and had 5 children. This guy was wildly older than Patty. And if you've been actively following the story from the beginning, you'll remember that Patty's dad was also named Frank, which I thought was a little weird. I thought it was a little weird. I'm not going to infer too much there, but like if you're picking up what I'm putting, I don't know. It was just weird. So for the sake of the story, sometimes I'll have to make sure you guys know I'm saying Frank Columbo or Frank DeLuca, or maybe I'll just say DeLuca, something like that. So DeLuca and Patty are working next door to each other, and he eventually goes, "Patty, why don't you come work over here at Walgreens?" Bro, this is really messing me up because Patty is 16. She's got a little like coffee shop job. Bro, even now, like in this era, having a coffee shop job is the cutest, okay? Like that's a fire job. It's like, I work at the coffee shop. So she's in the 70s working a cute little coffee shop job, 16, like every morning, you know? And then DeLuca's over here like, "Hey baby, you wanna come work at Walgreens?" I don't know. But she is so infatuated with Frank that she decides to take the job, and he hires her under Walgreens. They had a mutual interest in each other that quickly turned sexual. And look, guys, this next part I'm about to tell you, just straight up, trigger warning, fucking weird, just really weird. Like this is about to get so weird. But I have to tell you, when I was reading through this case, I got to this part because I was pretty familiar with what happened and like my jaw on the ground. I don't know what's going on here, how this happened, but I had to check multiple sources to ensure that I was getting this right. Patty was not only having a sexual relationship with DeLuca, but you remember I said that she really, really loved attention and that, you know, that was her lifeblood, everything. Sometimes people that love attention, they'll do things for shock value or say things to people for shock value because any attention is good attention, right? So Patty would run around school showing photos to her classmates that she barely knew because Patty didn't have any friends of her having intercourse with Frank DeLuca's dog. I have so much trouble even saying that sentence. It's coming out like staccato. Like I gotta put a period after every word because my brain refuses to process the whole sentence. I'm not doing it. I'm good. A lot of people recounted this. And that's when they were like, whoa, I mean, we already knew Patty was weird, but now she's real weird. real weird. So she arguably has even less friends. I don't even know, dude, I can't even like fathom that chapter. Can you imagine being at school and like this chick that you barely know is like, check out this picture. I'm like, yo, whoa, what? This relationship goes on for about a year or so. And then in April of 1974, when Patty was about 17 years old, she decides that she's going to move out of her parents' house. Her parents didn't really know too much about what was going on in her life. Even though she was running around school, showing these photos to people, she really kind of kept the affair low key. So much so that Frank's wife didn't even know what was going on. She ends up moving out of her house when she's 17, and she tells her parents that she's getting her own place. They were so excited for her. She was being so independent. They even gave her money upon her leaving. They believed her. They were excited for her. Of course, they loved and missed their daughter, but this is just a moment of growth for her. But what they didn't know was Patty wasn't moving into her own apartment. Patty was moving in to live with Frank DeLuca full time. There was a brief period of time where Patty was living in the house with DeLuca's wife and the children, and she kind of played babysitter. And I think they were able to keep things under wraps, but ultimately DeLuca decided that he was going to leave his wife and his children and be with Patty. I think that when DeLuca finally left his wife, maybe they felt like they didn't have to be as secretive. I think Patty was 18 by this time. And Elk Grove really isn't that small of a town. By the mid-70s, they probably had 20,000 to 30,000 people. But Patty and DeLuca worked together in close quarters. So after he left his wife, they were a little bit more open about what was happening. And it ends up getting back to Patty's parents. Remember when I said that Frank Columbo had a little bit of a temper when his team was losing? Well, that also carried into 30-something-year-old men dating his freshly 18-year-old daughter and corrupting her essentially. So when Frank Columbo finds out about their relationship, he finds DeLuca leaving his job one day and he confronts him with a shotgun and he tells him, "You need to stay the hell away from my daughter." And bro, rightfully so. Oh my God, I can't imagine the betrayal, the stress, the anger when you find out that there's another dude that's roughly about your age, also named Frank, that's like taking advantage of your daughter. Yes, that's right. He grabbed the shotgun. And Frank DeLuca is incredibly, "Whoa, man, whoa, don't do this. You need to chill." And Frank Columbo is not having it. He's pissed, and rightfully so. Like, here he is. Here is that motherfucker standing right in front of him. DeLuca doesn't have any remorse for anything, but in the moment, when this girl's dad is holding a gun to his face, he's gonna be on his hands and knees begging for mercy. Frank Columbo does have mercy, but it's in the form of the butt of a shotgun. He hits DeLuca in the mouth with the back of the shotgun and ends up knocking a couple of his teeth out. And he tells him, "You stay away from Patty." This was in August of 1975, and the relationship had been going on for a while. He really did believe that he was gonna be with Patty now. And Patty, too, believed that she was gonna be with Frank DeLuca. This encounter enraged them both. Patty's been mad ever since she left the house. I mean, Patty's actually been mad ever since her parents had Michael. And this situation just infuriated her more. So sometime between August and October, they start plotting to kill Patty's parents. Now, I've heard of cases before where teenagers planned to kill their parents for a love interest. But what was weird about this was Patty was already out of the house. She was 18. She was living with her new lover. Like, what are you trying to do? Clearly, this was for revenge. Maybe DeLuca was super mad. Maybe Patty was, and then maybe they both were mad and just building off of each other. We're gonna go into BOZE conspiracy land just for a second. See, they had this relationship that was really built off of Patty being mad at her parents, being mad at her dad, wanting to like go after this older guy who also is like named after her dad. Like, dude, I'm sorry. I'm just not buying that like this 16-year-old that like had her like cute coffee shop job sees this late 30s pharmacy manager at Walgreens, and it's like that right there is the man for me. Like, I just feel like there was something else motivating her attraction. Then DeLuca is attracted to Patty because she's younger, she's pretty, there's an affair element, it's exciting, he wants to get out of his life with his 5 kids, he's bored of his wife, whatever. Well, after the first year or two of that, I personally think that that's just gonna fizzle out. And maybe something that brought them together again was intimacy bonding over a common enemy. This happens to people all the time, like when two lovers get together and they decide that they hate somebody's ex-boyfriend, and now they're both like talking shit about the ex-boyfriend, and they feel like they're getting closer because they both hate the same person. Personally, I think that Patty and DeLuca's relationship was kind of fizzling out because the excitement of it was gone, and then they were just left with this disgusting relationship. And now that Frank Columbo has stood up for his family and his daughter, they decide that's the enemy. We hate that guy. And hate brings an excitement to a relationship for two people that are bored like this. And hating the same person? Ho-ho. So between August and October, they begin to conspire to kill Patty's parents. They're just building off of each other left and right. Well, they don't want to do the dirty work. So Patty has, I was going to say, Patty's got a genius idea. I can't even, this is so ridiculous. Patty meets with these two guys, Roman, who's 34 years old, and this guy named Lanny, who's 25. And she tells them that she wants to put a hit out on two people, her parents. And they say, all right. Yeah, we can maybe swing that. How much money do you have? And Patty, who doesn't have any money, she says, I don't have any money, but I will have sex with you. They think about it for a minute and they say, all right, like, we're down for that. Let's go do it. And Patty's like, okay, all right, let's do it. One at a time, folks. She really does it. She hooks up with both these guys that night. And she is planning to have intercourse with them multiple times in exchange for these murders. Now, I want to remind you, because I'm personally really sensitive when it comes to anything with like women and sex and feeling like people are being taken advantage of or anything like that. But by all accounts, Patty was having consensual sex with these two guys. I mean, I don't think they were like touching swords. Like, I literally think it was like a little like rotation, you know. But Patty was having consensual sex with these people in exchange for the murders of her parents. And this went on for a few weeks. The guys would come over sometimes and they would do their thing. And then Patty would literally, this is in the court documents, after intercourse, Patty would pull out the floor plans or talk about how she's gonna leave the back door open, and they'd be like, okay, all right, cool, tight. Well, I'll see you next week. And then they would come back the next week, and then they would have sex again, and then Patty would be like, I'm gonna leave the door unlocked tonight. And they'd be like, all right, cool. And then they would come back another week, and then Patty and them would have sex again, and then she'd be like, when are you guys gonna fucking kill my parents? Like, literally, this was the behavior that was going on. And Frank DeLuca and Patty finally realized that these guys were they never planned to kill Patty's parents. They were just coming over and getting laid every single week. They were never going to kill her parents. So Frank has a plan B. He calls up Bert Green, who is his assistant manager at Walgreens. I don't know if Bert and Frank DeLuca were actually close friends or anything, because, I mean, he told everything in the court case later. But by some of the descriptions, it almost seemed like Frank DeLuca thought his managerial position extended outside of Walgreens. He would regularly ask Bert to drive him places. He would ask Bert to case the neighborhood that Patty's parents lived in with him. He would ask Bert to drop Patty off at different places. I mean, I don't know if he did this because he was a friend or because his boss was asking him to do it. But Frank DeLuca got incredibly comfortable with Bert. He was very open that they were trying to kill Patty's parents. He had even asked him to do it at one point. He tried to enlist him. And Bert kind of wanted to keep his job, and he would dance around the subject. he didn't want to do it. He would even say stuff to him, like after Roman and Lanny made it obvious that they were not going to kill Patty's parents based on their actions. He would almost kind of report back to Bert in this cool, collected way, like, yeah, looks like they're not going to complete the hit. Patty and I might have to do it ourselves. And, Bert's just over here driving. He's like, word, like, he does not want to be involved, but Frank just keeps telling him everything. Bert knew that Patty Columbo and Frank DeLuca wanted to kill Patty's parents. On May 4th, 1976, Patty Columbo was 19 years old. Frank DeLuca, her boyfriend, was 37 years old. Patty Columbo had left her parents' home, started a new life, and lived with her boyfriend. There was absolutely no reason to do what she did. But on that night, after trying to convince multiple people to kill Patty's parents for them, to no avail, they knocked on the house of Frank and Mary Columbo and entered the house with a gun. They shot Patty's father 4 times in the head, and Frank DeLuca shot Patty's mother directly between the eyes, killing her almost instantly. Patty, for some strange reason, took a knife and stabbed them several times, almost mutilating their bodies in the process of letting out all of her anger. Through all of the violence downstairs, her brother Michael was still asleep. They went upstairs and woke him up, and they shot him. But he survived the gunshot, and Patty began to stab her brother. Patty stabbed her brother over 87 times. I don't think that Patty's brother Michael realized how much his older sister hated him until this moment. After the murders, they messed up the house to try to make it look like some kind of home invasion gone wrong. Opening cabinets, scattering papers all over the place. They just roughed up the whole house. Each one of them drove away in one of the vehicles that were at the home. They dropped off one in a bad part of Chicago and another car in the Wooddale area, miles away. Patty and Frank DeLuca burned their bloody clothes. They got rid of the gun and they went back home to start their new lives. I still cannot wrap my head around this. This was clearly motivated by them building up to killing her parents because they thought they were the enemy. Some people thought this was an inheritance case, but there was really nothing to inherit. People thought that maybe Patty killed her brother because she wanted to collect some type of soul inheritance, but there really wasn't much money at all. Patty killed her brother because she hated him and she was jealous of the attention that he got. On May 7th, just a few days after the murder, the police found one of the Columbo vehicles and they ran the plates and tried to get a hold of Frank Columbo. They called and he never answered. But, he lives in Elk. It's a nice neighborhood. So they drive over there to let him know, hey, we found your car. When they arrived at the house, newspapers were piled up at the front door just for a few days, but it looked like nobody had been there for a while. But the front door was open. But when they went inside, that's when they found out that the entire family had been murdered. When they found Frank's body, he had been shot 4 times in the head, and he also had his skull crushed by a lamp. This didn't look like a robbery gone wrong. It kind of looked personal. Patty's mom also didn't just get shot or stabbed, her throat was slit. And very often when somebody has their throat slit, it means that the perpetrator specifically wanted to make sure that they were dead. That's usually what that means. And not to mention, when they got upstairs to find Michael, Patty's brother, the level of overkill either indicated a drug frenzy or it was personal. But the police don't pick up on these clues, and they think it was a robbery. They really legitimately think it was a robbery. They thought it was a robbery before even going to go talk to their daughter, Patty Columbo. Well, in thinking that it might be a robbery, they're looking around the house and a lot of valuables were left behind. They even find the diamond ring still on Mary Columbo's finger. They start thinking, well, this must have been a gang that broke in from Chicago and they were high on drugs, and so they just went into like a killing frenzy. This was really the path that they were on. But when they launched the investigation, obviously, they were going to talk to Patty and Frank DeLuca. The officers might have had the same idea of like, well, they were out of the house and there wasn't really a lot of money to be collected. Why would Patty be involved? But the tip-off was Hattie and Frank's stories didn't match up. And not only did they not match up, but they had a wild number of inconsistencies. That is what made the police start to look at her. So on May 15th, 1976, just 11 days after the murders, Patty Columbo was formally arrested on first-degree murder charges for Frank Columbo, Mary Columbo, and her 13-year-old brother, Michael Columbo. This town was so desperate to not believe that this young, pretty girl didn't do it. They ordered the psych evaluation. They're like, there must be something going on. There must be something that can explain this. And she was deemed fit for trial. Patty Columbo was perfectly fine. The number of witnesses in this case were overwhelming. We had Bert, the assistant manager from Walgreens. We had Roman and Lanny, who said, yeah, she tried to fuck us and get us to murder her parents. There were people around town that had heard them talking about it, people that had seen them hooking up way before she was 18. This was a mess, and the evidence was all over the place. Later in the trial, the police recounted their behavior the day of their arrest. A guy named Lieutenant Braun, who was the Cook County lieutenant, he came to the house knocking on the door, and through the door, Frank DeLuca was saying, because, he had identified himself, Frank DeLuca was saying, can you hold on? I need to make some calls. Which is like the most sus thing ever. Like this was before they even realized how inconsistent their stories were. He's knocking on the door and Frank's like, hey, chill for a minute, chill. And he's not opening the door. This is like way more suspicious. And he keeps knocking on the door and saying, you guys need to open up. Like, Patty's parents are dead. We need to talk to you about this. And while Lieutenant Braun is knocking on the door, at one point, Patty yells, you motherfuckers aren't coming in here. And he's like, yo, whoa. I mean, this is the 70s. This is like when people have some real like oink oink mentality towards the police. They're like, you pigs aren't getting in here. So she's going on. And then when the police said, well, if y'all don't open the door, we're going to kick it in. And Patty's like, you guys are fucking animals. And they start to kick the door in. They're going to break in. They're putting pressure on it. And DeLuca's like, all right, I'll open the door. And I mean, this gets them arrested immediately. Another thing that I thought was really weird. At one point, there was an investigator named Landers. And Investigator Landers is at the courthouse. And Patty makes a request to speak with him. He goes to meet with her, and Patty says, I'm so happy that you guys could be here. I really want to tell you something. My attorney would advise against it, but I need to talk to you. And the investigator's like, okay, I just want to remind you that you have the right to have an attorney present. You can call them at any time. And Patty's like, no, I really want to talk to you. She starts to tell the investigator about this vision that she had. I'm going to read it to you. In this vision, she said that she saw her mother and father lying on the floor of the living room in the house next to a chair by the rail, and he was lying on his back. He was wearing dark-colored pants, and he had socks on but no shoes. She said she went into the hallway and saw her mother. Her mother was lying on the floor, and her mother was wearing a nightgown and a bathrobe. Then she said in this vision, she saw her brother in the bedroom, and the bedroom was dark, and she couldn't tell if he was wearing clothes or pajamas, and there was a hall light on. The investigator then asked her at this point, in this vision, did you see yourself in the house? And she said yes. He then asked, do you see yourself involved in the killing of your mother, your father, or your brother? And she said, I'm not certain, I'm confused. At that point, he said he asked her to go on with her statement. And she said that she saw her father, and her father told her that Jesus said that he would forgive her, even though she had been wrong. She then tells the investigator that she feels like she may have been involved. And she also talked about how she claimed she was living with fear of what her parents would do to her, and also hate. A lot of hatred for her parents. She then told the investigators, I told my attorneys that I wanted to talk to you. I told them I didn't care what they say. I just want to talk to you guys. I just want to see you guys. I'm curious what you guys think about this testimony from the investigator on what Patty was trying to do in this moment. Did she feel genuine guilt? Did she try to seem honest but victim-y and hope that these men might help her? Or was she just a confused kid trying to get something off of her chest? I mean, her admitting to hating her parents is really interesting to me. It almost seems like a mix of her victimizing herself but wanting to get these things off her chest. But I don't know. I defer to you. I'm just here to tell you what happened. Following a jury trial in 1977, Frank DeLuca and Patty Columbo were found guilty of 3 counts of murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. Court sentenced Patty to over 300 years for her crimes, and DeLuca had the same. I would almost want to think that the Patty Columbo and Frank DeLuca story is a cautionary story of falling into love and murdering for love, but Patty didn't have to kill anybody. Patty absolutely didn't have to kill anybody. Nobody's got to kill anyone. But Patty wanted to kill her parents. Over the years, Patty and Frank DeLuca applied for parole many times, but they were always denied. Patty still spends her time at the correctional center, apparently teaching arts and crafts, and she does social work with the other inmates. At one point in 2014, Frank DeLuca applied for parole, and he told the board that if he got out, he would love to live with his family in Florida. But he believes that the crimes that he and Patty committed were so bad that they should never be let out. And that's exactly what happened. Frank DeLuca died this year in 2023, and he was punished for the rest of his life. Patty Columbo is still in jail to this day. I don't see her getting out anytime soon. A triple homicide of your family and your 13-year-old little brother? Man, make all the arts and crafts you want, but you can stay in there. Don't forget, I'm here every week. So I'll see you next week with another case.